Well, hello, everybody. Again, everybody. Yeah, I seem to be tripping over my tongue a lot today. Welcome back to part 2 of Double Trouble with Jessie on Wednesday. And I don't feel like doing announcements now, so I'm not going to do them. They were done with the previous show. And without any further ado, I'm going to bring on our lady. And hello,
Hello,
everybody.
hello.
It's so good to see you, Jojo, Captain Amber. Who else? Kim, all of you, welcome and thank you for joining us for part 2. Wow, I mean, hmm, I
We
have
left
to
that
say,
off on a very
every show
strong,
is,
stingent note, didn't we?
yeah, absolutely. I'm just saying, it's like every now and again, every show to me like this is always concerning, but and distressing is more the word. But I have to say, this is one of those shows again that really distresses me because I mean, I was just saying to you behind the scenes now, the level of torture on every level
Right.
possible in the human energy field, in the body, in the mind, in the spirit, in the emotions, they are able to traumatize, and they have. And the cruelty with which children have been treated is, I don't think I'll ever be able to wrap my head around that, ever. Because
Right.
how does one actually harm some innocent, defenseless creature? And I mean, I'm the same with animals, exactly the same. I'm the same feeling. It's like, how do you hurt someone with such glee when they
Mm-hmm.
are that much smaller and that much more
Right.
defenseless than you? Obviously, I understand the whole projection because
Mm-hmm.
it's their own unhealed trauma that they just keep replaying over and over and over. And the worse they do it, the worse they're actually feeling inside of themselves. That's
Yeah.
really what it's about. So, yeah, let's hope we can shed some light on more topics and, yeah, just walk this path together even
Mm-hmm.
further.
So true. Yeah. So in the last episode, we really got into the twinning, some of the different things that they do with that. But we're going to get into the deeper level now with the system and the twinning, and that gets into the soul torture. Um, they use all sorts of different bonding um, experiments and test with different things. But go ahead and show the first picture there with the twins that we've got, and then we're going to look at like how some of their experience or
Mm,
experiments
mm,
work. There we go. Yeah. So this was another one. I had no idea this guy had a twin. We have Sean Ashmore and Aaron Ashmore. And now that I say that, I probably have seen both and thought they were the same person. Um, you know, but you have them being actors for X-Men and Smallville. They're identical twin brothers, both in Hollywood. Many didn't realize there were two of them, but Sean Ashmore and Aaron Ashmore are identical twin brothers, both of whom are Canadian actors. Sean's known for his roles in X-Men films and The Following, and Aaron is recognized for his performance in Smallville, Warehouse 13, and Killjoys. So I don't even know which is which out of these two, but um, yeah, interesting. So, as we get further, how do the system's experiments work on twins? Often the base starts with, they'll have two twins. They're going to bring him in. They may have been raising him in certain families or had their eye on him from the time that they're really little, but they purposely will cause near-death experiences for both the twins, and to the extent that, you know, that the near-death experience or torture will cause their soul to leave their body. So, um, they really will bring them to that point of death where the soul is exiting the body. And different ways that they would do this, that I witnessed, um, could be choking, was a common one. Drowning was a really big one the system would use. Um, and then, they would resuscitate one but not the other. So as they went on with the experiments, um, they would do things that, there's a moment where when the body completely dies, the soul, ascends and goes to heaven, but they would, then play with the resuscitation and try to get one of the opposite soul to go into the opposite body to see if, they could, um, bring, um, or exchange souls and put the souls into different bodies. Then they would do things like bringing back the other one to see if that, if they could bring back the soul of body A and put it into body B after they had the other soul. So they would do weird things like that and try to document that information. Um, but the question is, was it really soul swapping, or was it, you know, more than that? Some of their claims that it was true soul swapping is that you have claims that then, high level witches would enter into the one child's body, preventing the soul from coming back. Um, in that, then they would, play with which soul could get into the body that was available, stuff like that. So that's kind of how they would do that.
I
But
actually saw a movie I actually saw a movie on Netflix maybe a year or two ago about something similar, couple, and it
mm,
starts with lucid dreaming. They start doing it with lucid dreaming, and
yeah,
then the guy swapped into her body, and she couldn't get back in, and he of course created or did all sorts of evil things, um, pretending to be her. So again, they're showing you in plain sight, aren't they?
yeah, they do. Yeah, it's crazy. All right, go ahead to the next one. Um, so, some of the devastating impact in all of this, and again, they would experiment across all different spectrums of, fraternal twins versus non-fraternal, just two children around the same age they've grabbed from different families, children that are siblings, um, and then, in that, a lot of what happened was just that the children died. They couldn't get it to work. Um, they may have like a high level person who'd be able to sustain that body with their spirit for a little bit of time, but the problem was that once, that high level occultist was not in the body, the child died. Um, so, um, just horrific things. But this star was another one. I had no idea she had a twin. You have Hunter and Scarlett Johansson. Only one of them is famous, and opens the. You've got the public twin and then the hidden twin, where they'll have one be elevated and one really behind the scenes. Scarlett Johansson was a fraternal, um, or non-fraternal twin brother named Hunter Johansson, with whom she shares a very close bond. Hunter is known for his philanthropic work and is currently single, as Scarlett has mentioned in interviews. So, yeah, interesting. Um, in
And then
this,
sorry, I just want to say, this whole thing with these guys being philanthropists is a word they love to throw around, right?
yeah,
He's a
usually
philanthropist.
you get the philanthropist, the theosophical, and the engineers are big. Architects can be a big word too for them. But yeah,
Oh. Okay, let's see.
yeah.
Next
So
one.
with these, they do all sorts of stuff. You've got, where they've been in the genetics and the study of genetics for a very long time. So, there's science in this. It's not just that the experiments are on children, they are experimenting even at the point of conception, where, they're seeing how many times can they, um, multiply an embryo, where they may be creating, 10 to 20 off of that one embryo that they're splitting. And the splitting then is not natural as it would be with twins. It's a forced splitting. But in that, every time they continue to split again and again and again, you begin to get defects. You rather than identical, there'll be differences, there'll be changes, and that impacts the viability of the embryos and the eggs. They experiment with artificial wombs, like they did, you have a whole bunch of different types of concepts. You're going to have the cloning concept, which they brought out with Dolly the sheep, which that was a complete lie. What they did in that situation, and they'll do this with embryos as well. But in that initial phase, when the egg and sperm come together, you get almost. We'll just, for the sake of explanation, we'll describe it as you've got that egg with a cover, a shell over it, and um, they'll remove all the DNA out of that that shell, and they'll then remove DNA from another shell, and they'll put the DNA from the first shell into the DNA of the second shell. That's called DNA transplanting. That's what they did with Dolly the sheep. Cloning is where you take a non-replicating cell like a rib, rib cell, or it could be another organ like a muscle tissue. Like your muscle tissue isn't necessarily self-replicating, and they'll take that, and then from that they get a whole new person that's the exact same, that's identical. That's what true cloning is. Well, the truth is that they have never cloned. Nobody's able to clone. They can't do it, but they want you to believe that they can. And what they're doing really is the DNA transplanting. And what happens in that process is they discard a life. They destroy life in that. With the artificial wombs, they try to recreate the amniotic fluid. They have sheeps or goats that it's almost like they grow them in like a plastic womb. And, those wombs usually are open. You're able to see into them. You're able to touch, the creature as it's growing and stuff. So they've, tried that. They've tried that with people as well. There were stories a little while ago about almost like a med bed type machine that was an artificial womb that they were going to start introducing for growing infants in the womb. They've done surrogate wombs where they'll take the embryos and put them into a a woman that's not their mother's, their natural mother's womb. So you get a lot of their playing with genetics. Um, so, as you look at twins, it's interesting because some, you get where you almost feel, everything you see, they look absolutely identical. What's interesting though is that no matter how identical the twins are, you usually get differences in the characteristics, the personality, the likes, the dislikes. Um, and you don't ever get two individuals that are exactly the same in every way, even down to each one having different fingerprints. Even identical twins have different fingerprints. So that tells you that the design is God's, right? Um, because otherwise, genetically, scientifically, they should be the same in every way, but they're not. So, really, there's a factor that the system or scientists, they can't recreate the Lord's forming and fashioning in the womb. Even when they try to play with it, they can't usurp the sovereignty of God. He allows these individuals to be created, and he forms, he fashions, he prepares good works for them to do, and the system can't, really impact that. So there's a lot that they try to, they want to be gods. They try to be gods. They try to mess things up. And, when they get mad, they end up just destroying. Um, but so let's see, we have Rami and Sammy Malik. Um, and I might not have said that correct, but Sammy is a teacher, while Rami is a world famous actor. Uh, you kind of have the same thing as the last ones. You've got one twin that's public and one twin that's really private life. Remy is an American actor known for his roles in Bohemian Rhapsody and Mr. Robot, while his twin brother Sammy works as a high school English teacher. Both grew up in Los Angeles as children of Egyptian immigrants. So kind of interesting.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. Very interesting, especially because we know that the system has a great obsession with Egypt.
Yeah. Right?
Hmm.
Yeah. The pharaohs, the long lines of the pharaohs. And that gets
Hmm.
into some of the interesting experiments, um, where they even play, with necromancy and um, forms of trying to raise the dead. Um, some of the extremes that they have gone to are things where, um, they would experiment on the twins. They would, basically cause one twin to die, but then they would try to connect the soul of the twin that they killed to the body of the twin that was still living by putting parts of the dead twin into the living twin. Um,
No.
yeah. So
What type
you'd
of
get
part?
like kidneys, lungs, hearts, minds, brains was
So
a
they would
big
do a
one.
transplant. So they would actually
Yeah,
remove the existing twin
a
heart or
viable,
kidneys.
perfectly working organ and replace it with the dead twin's organ.
How sick and depressed. Okay, sorry. Carry on,
Yeah,
Jess.
then you get where that would get into some of their mind vaults of and their forefather vaults where, ultimately they're trying to find a way to bring back these high level masons or elitists. And could they, you know, connect the spirit of these high level masons who are dead to um, to these children and thus give them a young body, to the extent where even they would do things like, blood transfusions at the point of death, like as the elite member was passing away, they would be transfusing the blood of that person into the body of a young one because the life is in the blood, and wanting to transfuse like the memories and the soul essence, all of that. And there are rituals for that, that they will perform and do, to try to,
Oh, that's
you know, and that gets into some of the breath. Like they'll sometimes do the last breath ritual with that too, to have the child suck in the soul of that person. Um, so they would do sometimes causing, like if they didn't do the soul sucking for some, they would try to cause the near death experience, have that child's spirit leave, and then try to get the soul of the person who is dying into that child's body. They just, it continues to get, there's like
wow.
nothing they have not tried. It's crazy.
Is this when they do their reincarnation rituals as well? When
This could
they
be, yeah, when they're, and they'll use different books, but you mostly would have the Book of the Dead that they're going to be using for that. Um, trying to bring in reincarnate. You've got two different things. You have reincarnation, which most people understand that that's their belief that, your spirit leaves, but then your spirit is born into another body, and that could be an insect, that could be an object, that could be, anything, an animal, another person, and you get a chance to live again. If you've lived well, you know, y- supposedly you're supposed to keep getting a better and better life. If you don't live well, that's where it keeps getting worse and worse, and you end up an insect or something worse. Um, but then you have what Michael Aquino taught, which was reconstitution. And reconstitution is the concept that you're eternal. It's very focused, and it's that your body doesn't matter, only your soul does. And if you learn how to control your soul essence, you can continue to live and regenerate yourself, per se, continually into whatever form you desire. Yeah, so
so he completely bypasses the experience of living and enjoying life on Earth. So
well,
is
no,
that
no,
what you're
no. You
saying?
would still be reconstituting on Earth, but you're not bound by, let's just say, fate. You're not bound by, there's not a force outside of yourself controlling your rebirth. But at the same time, you aren't necessarily going to start at the point of birth with regeneration. You just can be, um, because you can enter into your energy, your spiritual form, or you can be in your physical form. You control it because you're a god. You're spirit, but you also can physically manifest and make yourself whatever you want to be.
They really use these laws unto their own desire, don't they? They just turn and twist them into whatever they feel like it. Yeah.
They
Wow.
do. Yeah, and
Interesting.
Ragnarok, the Ragnarok bases, in the north, Alaska, and the Greenland bases, where you have, the Greenland one is where you have the base that's stuck in the 1950s. Those two bases are the biggest ones with the projects and experiments with the reconstitution. So that was where they were doing a lot of that, was in Alaska and up in the Greenland base up there, Camp Century. Let's go ahead and go to the next one here. So, you know, they also, you've got Van Diesel, Paul, and his twin, Paul Vincent. Van Diesel, you know, very few people knew he even had a twin. I didn't know he had a twin. But what's interesting is when you look at their pictures, like their characteristics, their features are so vastly different. You have him having more of like that, you know, the kinky hair, the African American look. And then you have his twin having more very Scandinavian, you know, straight hair, looks like he's a little blondie, very fair features. So I found that kind of interesting. But so Paul Vincent is a film editor who's not public, while Vin Diesel has works in the film industry as a sound editor. They share a close bond, although Paul tends to stay out of the public eye. So, yeah, so interesting.
Wow.
Yeah.
It would seem like they would have experimented somehow with and as you said, because he kind of looks mixed race, and then the
Right.
brother's the blondie. So it's almost like that part of that experimental, that interracial experimental and twinning, to see how that would work.
Right.
I mean, I'm sure they would really just give a grand overview of everything, but I'd be very interested to know what their relationship was like, actually, you know. I would be interested to know, I would really be interested to see these statistics. I mean, in terms of how that's actually worked, because there's so much of it that's done. And wow. Anyway, okay, let's carry on.
Yeah, let's go to
Are
the
we done
next
yet?
one. No, we got a few more. So another one, I again did not know there were twins, but you have Kiefer Sutherland and Rachel Sutherland. You know, she tends to be behind the scenes in production, while Kiefer is an actor. And they were twins born in December 21st, 1966, to actors Donald Sutherland and Shirley Douglas. Both have pursued careers in the entertainment industry, with Kiefer becoming very well known for his role in 24, and Rachel working as a post-production film supervisor. So, yeah, so you get that. And like when you think about this, you know, really there's a strong connection that they, you know, in the system, they're wanting to find ways to raise up those that they believe are elites. And so you will see, you know, generationally, they're looking at that. They're looking at the blood, you know, the descendants, who are they coming from? What rights have been coming through that family line? How does that connect to the land? You know, they have massive vaults that are called their descendant vaults, and you know, where they cryogenically freeze, you know, eggs, sperm, and embryos. One of those was located under Emerald City, under the Pentagon. So that was one of the larger ones that they had. But they've been, you know, playing with genetics for such a long time under the scenes and doing this torture of infants, or, you know, before they form into the fullness of their being physically, you know, for a very long time. Go ahead to the next one.
You can absolutely see, and that's kind of like, I think, what the monarch programming is about, Jesse. Because if you look
Hmm.
at the caterpillar to the butterfly, it's the only creature that changes its DNA completely. So I think, this whole generational abuse and the monarch programming is all about changing the DNA of the bloodlines completely to suit them. When it's
Yeah,
lack of empathy, lack of compassion, it's just torture all the time. So we know when somebody's been tortured and that's all they know, they're probably going to continue that cycle, right?
right. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, so I mean, again, they withhold nothing, so you get all sorts of different projects that they've done. Um, Here's another twin set. We'll get into some of the other projects in a minute. But you've got Ashton Kutcher and Michael Kutcher. They're not identical. Michael was born with health complications. Ashton talks openly about their twin bond. Um, it's another example of one becomes famous, the other doesn't. But Ashton and Michael are twin brothers born February 7th, 1978, in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. While they share a close bond, their life experiences have been quite different, particularly due to Michael's challenges and with cerebral palsy and heart issues. Um, so this is common where you get a lot of different disorders, even in the womb, like twin to twin transfusion, where one's getting good nutrients and the other's not. Um, and in fact, that one can impact where both twins can be lost in the womb, um, because they both end
Wow.
up. The one gets way too much oxygen or other things, and the other not enough, and they both can die from the implications of that. Um, so the youngest ones I saw with that, um, they were just at 21 weeks, and I literally was there right after they delivered them, um, through C-section, and they pulled them, had them in uh, the we'll say the room where they're working on them, they're assessing them, and it was really amazing because like the bigger one was probably like the size of your hand. The smaller one was like just a little over, um, like a little over half of your, like past your palm into half your fingers. He was so tiny, yet he was so strong. Like when the doctor was leaning over him, he actually grabbed onto the doctor's button on his coat and he wouldn't let go of it. And it was just amazing to see this little life. And I watched those boys. It took about the one that was more healthy was in the NICU for 6 months. The other one was there for quite a bit longer, before he was able to eventually go home. But really, a lot of health challenges. So I know many times you can get that with twins where they will face different challenges. And yeah, but
Exactly that. If you look at this as well, and now, I mean, I don't. Again, I want to just state. We don't obviously claim it is so, but when we see how these guys have risen in the system and the role they've played, or the roles they've played, one can assume quite strongly that there has been some kind of tampering. And when you look at a lot of these pictures we've just seen, in a lot of the instances, it makes sense that there would be, especially with the like twins like Ashton and his brother. The one
mhm,
is tall, strong, healthy, handsome, a success, a movie star, Hollywood celebrity, literally, right? Married to Demi Moore for, absolutely world famous. And then you have the brother that's obviously got challenges but stays in the background. and doesn't
Mm-hmm.
say much. So it's like, I wonder what kind of happened there. And then, of course, there's also, we're hearing about abortion trauma. So I
Mm-hmm.
would imagine that would be something they would do as well, is like with twins, they would abort one of the twins, right?
Yeah. Well, not just that, but you have infants that live through the abortion process too, where they may have been rescued at the last minute by a nurse. There's some famous individuals that have come forward, many with disabilities that have, spoken of that they were, they survived abortion. Um, you also get within the system, um, you actually have many of those with disabilities are more revered and prized than those who don't. Those are many of them are your high level oracles, those who can see, those that have, you know, phenomenal spiritual
Mm.
giftings, whether that's telekinesis, but you tend to get more of the spiritual giftings with the disabled.
Well, that would make sense because if we um, just looking at statistics where, let's say, blind people,
Mhm.
born blind, would have this incredible ability to sense things around them. So their intuitive abilities are highly expanded because that's how they survive, right? So they're
Right?
unseen senses. So that would make sense to me as well, then, because if their physical body has been compromised like that, so they don't have, like, maybe even the ability to go and run or be outside or communicate properly with
Mhm.
other people, they might be severely autistic or something like that. And when you look at that movie again from years ago, Dustin Hoffman, Rain Man, where he was
Mhm.
autistic, but showed you exactly just by looking at the aeroplane, and whatever, he could rattle off statistics that not even a computer could.
Yeah.
But so it would make sense then to me, Jessie, that they would then, like, especially in a situation like this, and again, I'm not saying this is the case because with this particular, with these particular twins here, because I don't know their story. I didn't know Ashton had a twin either. But I'm
Mhm.
like wondering if part of this experiment with them wouldn't have been like Ashton being the superstar Hollywood demigod, while his brother might have had, like, obviously certain disabilities and stuff,
Mhm.
but possibly highly developed in the spirit realm, so
Yeah.
his spiritual gifts. And I would imagine that they would then be feeding off each other and
Mhm.
kind of filtering through to each other as well. I don't know, just weird
Yeah.
how that
And
worked
th-
out.
and they have it timed perfectly too, with the training for children that are in the system, where both will be being abused, whether
Yeah.
that's sexually, whether that's spiritually or emotionally. Both will have different aspects of the spiritual abuse, but they won't know that necessarily that the other one's being abused, unless it's where they're doing it right in front of them. Um, and you get a lot of that with the sexual abuse. um, the disabled, are highly targeted with sexual abuse, most of it because, of their inability to verbally communicate. And
Hmm.
you get with that, the average, which is a known, like you can look up for published, but this was in the caregiving fields. um, 7 out of every 10 females are sexually abused among the disabled, but 9 out of every 10 males are sexually abused. So think about that.
What?
Yeah, that's a lot. 9 out of every 10 males are sexually
Okay.
abused.
Okay, I can imagine why I think that would be because of their depraved idea of um, anal
Yeah,
penetration, let's just call it that.
correct.
But is there any other reason that that men would be more severely abused than women in terms of that?
No, I think it's just that within the system, they prize, that's what, the brotherhood is about. Um, that's their base imagery, is that star, five-pointed star representing the homosexual sex. Um, so that's how their base way of sex magic.
Yep, exactly. I
Yeah.
mean, but
It,
wow.
it's crazy when you think about that, and you know, and just then, being sensitive to each individual stories, because um, this abuse, it doesn't stop, it continues, and at the end of the day, it's not just the system trying to gain control over people's bodies, it's also to keep control over their soul. So let's, if you want to go to that one last article we have, how the system claims
Yep.
the body.
Um,
And
most
there were just
amazing.
another news article that was interesting that I got the other day. And it was about liquid death. Have you heard of this drink, Shanti?
Absolutely not. And I've never, I mean, I don't honestly buy things like that, but I've not heard of it. I don't
Yeah.
know if there's
So,
any South African in the chat that can validate whether we have that here or not, but not as far as I know.
yeah, it's interesting. So this is it's water um, a water brand that's called Liquid Death, but they started putting out things that they're offering to buy customers' souls, and it says even offers contract to put satanic deal in writing. So the article says you'd think that Liquid Death would be the name of some vile 150 proof liquor brand, but instead a brand of canned, not bottled water. That's it, the very essence of life marketed as death. Murder your thirst, the company's tagline goes, and yet it's hardly even transgressive, not in this day and age. In fact, the CEO said he came up with the brand identity while brainstorming the dumbest name he could think of in an attempt, as a CNBC put it, actually make water cool. So, Um, yeah, so that's out of the um, uh, you can see
Wow.
there was a commentary by C. Douglas Golden on November 7th, 2025. Um, yeah, so interesting that now, you know, and I don't know, like, I'm just curious with our topics today, but it's kind of funny that I don't know how many varieties of colors this comes in, but you know, the the concept of the system, taking something and completely trying to create the opposite and have both coexisting at the same time, and that really is kind of the backbone of the twinning, where they're wanting to what God has created to be good, to have life, to reproduce, to multiply, to continue generations, to have blessings, to have covenant relationships. The system takes and, tries to pervert where, no longer is it covenant relationship. It's relationships that really have no value, where you can just meet your pleasures and discard it your
Hmm.
as you will, right? where relationships no longer have value, you no longer have value. In fact, you don't even have an inheritance other than, you know, all this money you've stored up, but all of that's fleeting, like it doesn't last. You have no guarantee of even getting to enjoy that yourself. You know, so it dismantles everything and ends up with dead fruit. That's really what you get at the end of the day, which is where the enemy flourishes because, you know, where you have unrighteousness and dead fruit abounding, that's where you also have his demonic army, you know, flourishing. And that's his goal, is to raise that army up. And if he can find a way to intersect that with the physical world, he's going to do it. Um, and, you know, this gets into an interesting concept when we think about it. Um, you know, scripture tells us God is spirit, yet we know that Christ came in the flesh. And with that, after his death and resurrection, you have a glorified body, um, you know, where there's a transformation that takes place. And that's what each of us are promised. Mathematically, we can see that. Um, you know, the truth of that transformation, you know, if you have L, which is life, plus D, which equals death, right? The loss of your physical body, what do you get at the end of that equation? You always end up with the L and the D still. You don't lose one, you end up with the L and the D, showing that there's a transformation that happens. You have living, you know, in a way, living death, but it's not dead anymore. You have a new life, right? Um, that that we can't explain, we can't replicate on this side of the equation. But in that, um, you know, the enemy's going to try to do something different. When we think about God and his creation of the heavenly hosts, we have to ask the question, you know, are they in that state? Are angels in that state already with their glorified body? If they are, then we can understand, you know, what happened to Lucifer and those that were cast out. You know, when they were cast out from the Lord's presence, they lost part of that glorified essence. They can't enter back into that glorified state. They lost that glorified state, but they're trying to regain
Right.
even a little bit of that by
Mm,
possession, you know, possessing humans and people.
right.
Yeah, so it gets kind of
Exactly.
interesting as you think about that's really behind what all these experiments, why the system is trying to do it. Um, it deals with, you know, angels
Well,
that were cast out.
at the end of the day, they really have no lifeblood or life force of their own, so they have to
Right?
steal from others. And at the end of the day, they are all vampires. So whether
Yeah.
they are sucking blood or drinking adreno, or like being an energy vampire that like you were talking about earlier on with a little ovum, right? And
Hmm.
then literally capturing that and using that as a battery. I mean, how depraved is that? So they will steal every bit of life force they can because they don't have their own. And yeah,
Right.
unfortunately, all of them are vampires. So when you look at it in that way, whether you're a blood vampire, a blood sucking vampire, or an energy vampire, I really think it's so close to each other. And I'm really talking about the fallen ones here.
Hmm.
So I think it's safe to assume that they are all vampires. So vampires rule the world currently. That's the bottom line.
That's the bottom line, right?
We must all have our love water ready. Right,
Right?
Jessie? Get your rose water. I think I might already have some here. Just like spray them.
Open your own spring up, you know.
Wow, that is so wild. And they're telling us over and over and over again that that's what's happening and that's what they're doing.
Right?
I mean, if I wanted a cool name, I would have called it exactly what Prophet S was saying, like liquid life. You know, I mean,
Liquid.
if you
I mean,
wanna,
right, we would have
yeah,
put a good twist on it, not liquid death, you know. I mean, you got to ask
yeah,
what in the world is going on with that water? Is it really
and
just water? Like,
how much fun or how much parody, if you will, is in okay, come sign a contract with the devil or whatever it is they're doing. I
mhm,
mean, that is like who, and the scary part is people will do that. There are
right?
people who will do that. And I mean, they don't realize how dangerous that is because we know now. I mean, you really have to be on guard spiritually.
Yeah.
The days of just being willy nilly and doing things, we're under so much more siege right now than what we've
Mhm,
ever been before. So we have to be on guard even that much more. Very
right?
interesting. Yeah, sure. Hmm. Wow. Anyway, I don't think I have anything. Oh, I did have something else about the twins. That was another thing. We sometimes I've heard about one twin absorbing the other in the womb. What is that
Yeah.
about?
Well, you get that can get into like some of the same things like with the twin to twin transfusion, um, where you get, a splitting, uh, the egg may start to form in some ways, and this is where you can also get, um, what is it called? Like you get some of the conjoined twins. So it
Right,
kind of happens in that process. But then you get if one is not viable, um, you may just get like a piece, a weird formation of the one, like where you see like it's almost like a dead head attached to the shoulder of one, or they can completely be dissolved. There's been some cases where they found the one crystallized, fossilized inside of the other twin, things like that. So just
I've
weird
heard
things that
of
you can't always explain.
I've heard of some the surviving twin having more teeth, like literally having an extra row of teeth in their mouth. What do you say
Yeah.
about that?
Yeah, I mean, that could be too. Like that could be from that, formation. It may not have been a twin. It may have just been as they were forming, the multiplication was occurring faster
Right.
and, but
Would that be,
yeah.
when we're looking at that, call it absorption and or whatever it is, right? Would that be something that is contrived, or is that more by the system in their crude experiments, or is that something that is more natural as well? If there might be an imbalance, I don't know, somewhere in the amniotic fluid or something in the mom
Yeah,
or in the
I
dad,
think it
whatever.
would be part it it would be part of I could see it being more part of the natural process, even though the system could play a role in causing the death of the one, but it's natural that, if that process has started and the one becomes non-viable and dies, the body degrades and deteriorates and turns back into, you know, the liquid or the dust, whatever, and then that would just be absorbed by the twin that's there.
Right.
Um, Yeah,
Do they at all sacrifice one twin?
they do.
Like,
Yeah, they can do that in the womb purposely to try to cause things, to happen, that absorption or other things.
so even at a late stage, let's say, do they even go as far as, let's say, having the mom give birth to the one twin,
Yeah,
sacrificing that twin, and then a couple of hours later, the next one's born?
yeah. Or even, having both and then they sacrifice one while they let the other live.
What
Yeah,
is
so they
the
do it at the point of birth.
is I mean, sorry. Hmm.
They can do that at the point of birth.
Would there be something? Would that be part of just a normal sacrifice as they do, or is that part of the twinning experiment to sacrifice your twin at birth? And obviously, there would be so much spiritual trauma. I mean, sure, I can't
I
imagine
I
what
don't
that
think
must be
it's
like for a
part
little
of
baby.
the normal twinning program is to, they're going to be twinning two individuals together. Um, that it's not common in that twinning program for them to sacrifice one at the very beginning. Um, though, they could, um, but that can, there can be other reasons why they're doing it. Um, you can have, if they're, um, I know like with infants, I would watch as they would decide, and their phrasing would be, "This one doesn't have a soul." And they would check as they're born to see if they had souls, and if they didn't have a soul, they would just, throw them out. They would kill them, sacrifice them. So I would say more of that where they're sacrificing one twin, I would think it was more connected with their belief that one has a soul and the other doesn't have a soul.
I can't imagine how they can think that.
Yeah.
Anyway. And then, of course, the last one I wanted to ask you about was the Siamese twins. Is that again, I have to ask, is Siamese twins a natural birth defect, or would it be something that someone has tried to accomplish somewhere along the line?
I think it can be both. Um, you do get strange genetic things that happen for whatever reason. At the same time, I believe it can be, caused through trauma and, that trauma at the very early ages where the embryo is are forming. Um, at the same time, I've talked about how also within the system, they do surgeries, they do manipulations to children in the womb. So, could some of those be early on experiments where they're, purposely manipulating in the womb? So that gets more into like some of the things that, and I don't believe there's any documented information on this, but some of the things are as they would impregnate girls, they're causing trauma to them, and that trauma can last more than, just a day. They're doing it through that early period of the child forming. Um, and with that, you'd get them doing things with drugs, you'd get, experiments or projects that are going to include, electrocution, all sorts of horrific energy flows going through the mother's body. You get chemical warfare that they would use on these women. Certainly all those things are going to impact the forming of an unborn child. So I think that's the horrific truth, is that, you know, rather than genetics, is some of it caused through trauma through the pregnancies? Um, there's a high possibility for that,
Wow.
you know?
Well, knowledge is power, and every day on this channel we learn something new, don't we?
Yeah.
Jessie, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and information with us today. I think there's so many other rabbit holes we can dive down here with this stuff, and maybe we should actually, even if we
Yeah.
look into some of the
Well,
stuff.
yeah, we'll
Hmm.
talk after the show and pick some
Yeah,
further discussions.
cool. And then we will catch up with you guys next week. I was just thinking, yes, and if you didn't hear the announcement earlier, our membership show with Jessie is on the
I think the 5th
November 5th of
December.
December. Yeah, at 6 o'clock Central Africa time. And that's going to be 11 a.m. Eastern time. And that's on the 5th of December. And we decoding Harry Potter. So we're watching the first Harry Potter movie, and or Jessie, maybe you expand on that, just because you
Yeah,
do
so
it
we're
better.
gonna look at like, you're welcome to watch the movie on your own, but we're going to uh, pull out different aspects of the movie that go along with the training of the hierarchy kids in the system, and just have a discussion about that and how we can utilize that information, um, to have that knowledge and know how to minister to those that, have gone through those things in the system.
Absolutely. Well, we look forward to seeing you then, but obviously before then as well. So I want to thank you, everybody, for joining us today for Double Trouble Wednesday. Always hugely informative, or not always fun, but we always have
Mhm.
fun. But the topics are
Right.
not always fun. And thank you again for joining us. Thank you for walking this path with us all. I think the more of us who get what's going on here, the better. And we can
Yep.
always do it together. Mhm. Take care, everybody. God bless you all. And yeah, be cool, be kind, and take good care of yourself.